There we go. All right, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The War Table. Normally, Sid would be here with us, and he is going to try to make it, but he is not currently. But as always, I am Lyle, and I'm joined here tonight by a Bremlin from the Park of Falling Fire, who is going to be our Paragon healer to talk about Warder and the healer enchantments. If things can happen, work out well, we'll also get into Bard enchantments tonight. If not, well, we're gonna have to focus on one. With that started, Bremlin, tell us what about these Warder and the Warder enchantments that Healer has access to and what it can do.
Hello, I'm a Bremlin Darkwood from Falling Fire, as Lyle just said. So to break it down, I'm just gonna kind of go through and give my opinions on the different enchantments available to healer, starting sequentially with each of the different spell tiers. So for first level spells, we only got the one option, and that's gonna be your Blessing Against Wounds. It has a lot of general utility usage, but what I actually found to be one of its strongest strengths is going to be in those sort of very low spawn time games that I've seen some of our parks play or at other parks, even touch and go spawn games. It's going to be hard for you to keep up consistent enchantments, or maybe not as valuable because enchantments' goal is to keep people alive longer, so they're falling off pretty consistently. Unless you're using Blessing Against Wounds, and you can just keep that up consistently on all of your players because one extra hit is one extra hit. It's always great. Moving on from there at second level, you get Adaptive Blessing. I've just never found a great use for Adaptive Blessing. It's a per life enchantment, but the fact that it can't be worn with anything else and it falls off as a resistance, um, I find it difficult to find a good use for it unless you're exceptionally aware of the battlefield. And
Hmm.
even then, if that was something you were going for, I mean, there's just Enlightened Soul, which we'll talk about later, which I think is just personally better in most use cases.
Okay.
Moving on from there, you have Adaptive Blessing's big brother, Adaptive Protection. So Adaptive Blessing can be worn with another enchantment. So you can try and pull some shenanigans where you can try and save gummies with it because it's not a protection school. In the case of Adaptive Protection, you can't wear it with another enchantment. It's just considered a full-on enchantment by itself.
Hmm.
But it does allow you to just be completely immune. Again, I find the use cases limited unless you have a very specific counter build you're trying to go for on the field. Um, in most use cases that I've seen, you're generally better just throwing more of your enlightened souls out. So that's just a big one. Is just in my opinion, enlightened souls is going to really be your bread and butter in most cases.
So I'm kind of want to interrupt you a little bit. Um, can you explain about what some of these enchantments are actually doing? You mentioned how
Oh,
adaptive protection can uh, give you immunity, and then you've mentioned resistances. Um, but what does and blessing you said did give one, so you did give a little bit here, but like what exactly does that mean? Those uh, resist a hit or the resisting or immunity. What does that mean for our players?
so in the case of Adaptive Blessing, it's going to give you resistance to one incoming effect, and it's at the time of being placed. So you can say, hey, you're going to be resistant to flame, and that means the next time that player is going to be affected by a flame school, instead it's going to be eaten by the enchantment falls off, and they are unaffected. In comparison, you have adaptive protection, which just makes you flat out immune continually. So resistance is going to be a situation where the next effect that would hit you will just not work, but you'll lose the enchantment, versus immunity is just immunity and it continues to stick to the player until death or continuing onward if it is persistent. But we'll talk about persistent enchantments a little bit later.
Okay. Real quickly, I'm also going to go ahead and throw this in because we have a moment to do so. I want to go ahead and welcome Abeja to the war table as well. Abeja is another strong healer, and who was also going to be helping give some of their opinions and their voice to the conversation. Um, Abeja, if you wanted to come off mute and say hello, or if you want to wait, that's fine too. I'm not sure if you're ready yet.
Yeah, hi guys. Like Sir Lyle said, I'm a Paragon healer in the same kind of fashion that a Gremlin is. We had gotten our Paragons at the same time. Very excited to share what I can with you guys. Always willing to have conversations and look over spell lists if you're ever interested. Um, so yeah, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Um, I wouldn't be where I am right now if it wasn't for Cid and Cookie and other Paragon healers reaching out to me and helping, me, I guess, not only get involved in the game, but really fall in love with healer and what I can do as a healer.
That's awesome. I am so glad you were able to join us tonight. Um, I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to tell us about playing the class, and especially the enchantments with it. Um,
Mm.
with that said, I did kind of take away some of the thunder from a Bremlin, so I do want to go ahead and give it back to him, just so he can finish up on what he was going through with the enchantments. Bremlin, thank you
Oh,
again
no,
for
no,
letting
no.
me throw a railroad in there real quick.
No, you're fine, Sir Lyle. So just keeping it going, and I feel like I had my thunder stolen. I actually needed a moment to just double check and make sure I wasn't saying anything too crazy. So yeah, the big spell at third level is gonna be the adaptive protection. You don't really have anything else large going on there. The fourth level is when we really start to open up and see a lot more enchantments become available. You have adaptive blessings Big Brother, which is blessing against harm, and that's just going to be a resistance to anything that could come their way. So wound, state, affliction. They do have to take whatever the very first next one is, and it is a fourth level spell and is per refresh. So in my mind, I find it difficult to justify unless you have a very specific build in mind. It's not an enchantment that I personally use regularly. At
Okay.
fourth level, you also get access to. Oh, sorry.
Oh, I was just saying, okay, like
All right. Um, so you get one of your first like kind of bread and butter enchantments, in my opinion, at this level, which is going to be projection from projectiles. So if it is a spell, not to include mage balls, but if it is not to include spells or mage balls, but it's any kind of projectile, throwy, javelin, arrows, um, they just do not work against you. So against classes that are like assassins who are going to be running up on those archers or those squishies to try and take them out, it can just really be an excellent counter. You have to be kind of mindful and look at the teams and try and see if the opposing team has a lot of archers. Don't take protection from projectiles if the enemy team has no throwaways or archers, because then you're just wasting spell slots. But on a very projectile heavy team or on a large battlefield, it can be a very significant force multiplier.
there's some
On Okay, go.
drafting thoughts and processes that could go into that if you know the enemy healer might have taken pro. Go ahead and give them all the healers. Maybe you can push them over to there, and then all of the arrows aren't going to work the way that they wanted, or they'll have wasted that enchantment. So there are some drafting you can take into to counter pro on both ends of that. Uh, but continue, please.
Of course. Um, Going on from there, you have your fifth level enchantments. Blessed Aura, which is just a slightly better version of Blessing Against Harm, in that now it also includes harm effects that would possibly affect the player's gear or weapons. Again, for me personally, I don't take Blessed Aura. I never have, because I just think that a fifth level spell needs to have more impact, and the issue is that you don't get to pick when it goes off. It just is the next effect that hits the player. So if they take a wound or they get hit by something errant, it's not necessarily going to stop like the big one-hit kill spell or the spell that's going to shatter their equipment. It's going to go off on whatever it's going to go off on. But you do get access to what are, in my opinion, two of the really big enchantments. One is obviously a warder special, and the other one is a necromancer special. So the really, really, really big one, in my opinion, the one that's going to cause the most grief for the enemy team is, of course, Enlightened Soul. That wonderful level 1 monk ability that just makes it so that all of those ranged verbals at a range greater than touch have no effect. That's a lot of verbals. It's most verbal spells are going to affect that. And so now if the enemy team's running a warlock or they're running any kind of long range point click and delete caster, it's going to have no effect on any of your teammates as long as you give them that enlightened soul. I find it also is excellent for putting on casters because they are the very prominent target of those kind of spell effects. The other absolutely massive enchantment that less from a ward perspective, but from that sort of necromancer perspective, is the undead minion spell. I think in the current version of the game as it exists, this spell is maybe a bit overtuned, honestly, for what it provides, which is in like long spawn time games, it allows you to bring back a player using the raise dead spell, ignoring the cursed condition on them, essentially for free. It does not cost you a spell to do so, and you can just do that continuously unless they are, dispelled.
Hmm.
And so you can kind of just keep those players up continuously. Now, this might sound bad, I guess, but if you know there are certain newer players who they're going to be coming to you a lot, and you're running a sort of hybrid healing build, you can throw an undead minion on them because now you're not having to constantly charge raise dead, and also they kind of get to enjoy the game more too because they get to get in there and just really throw it all out. Like they can just keep running in. Now, if that forms good or bad habits, that's a different discussion.
I don't know, but I can absolutely say I love anything that makes the newer players have more fun. So, any kind of bonuses to that. Abeja, you are welcome to also, I see you typing, you're welcome to chime in too if you have a thought or if you have a counterpoint, please
No,
interject.
I absolutely agree with a Bremlin. I find using dummies on newer players or maybe less confident fighters, people who are fielding for the first time or fielding a new class, because it can be a little overwhelming on a kingdom field in comparison to a local field.
Hmm.
Um, and I really do see the difference in, I think, their confidence, just knowing that they don't have to worry about failing their team or, I think that there's a mental shift that they go through recognizing that they're doing exactly what I need them to do. And it also gives us some practice doing some unit fighting as well. So it's like my gums respond to me. So they know that when they die, they come back to me. They need to report back to me and they have kind of an objective. So I think it kind of gives them a little bit of confidence having a direction to go rather than a more general, like, okay, just swing stick and figure it out.
I want to throw a counterpoint on here, as
Yeah.
we're all three of us are actually essentially saying the newer players, and I like the younger players better too. The ones that are young and can run 500 times faster than me and not be tired. But the counterpoint is, whereas a druid and its golem is who you want to give to your stronger, a mid-tier to A tier fighter. Um,
Mhm.
with what we're saying here, the gummies, your undead minions, should be your lower tier fighters, to get the most maximum effect.
Um, I can sort of see that, but there are times like if you don't have a druid where if you have a high skilled fighter who they're exceptionally good at diving, for example, you can get them back in the fight continuously and they can just keep picking off those sort of high value targets in the enemy team. There can be a lot of value in that. I think it's going to depend a bit, but I would generally agree with that. Yeah.
So just to
Yeah.
let me make sure I'm understanding. So if Golem is your tyrant, your juggernaut that who wades through the masses, destroying them, your gummies are your swarms. Is that a good way to look at it?
Uh, I'd say so, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think a lot of why I hesitate to give newer fighters, I guess like no, not me myself as a healer, but why I would hesitate to give that to them is because they have to remember so much. And if they're not used to playing as a golem or with troll's blood or, you know, an enchantment like that, it can get a little overwhelming and it's a lot to keep track of. And I wouldn't want to unnecessarily put them in a position where they might get in trouble with a reeve for unintentionally forgetting something or not taking into consideration certain protections or certain um, certain protections, certain resistances in the moment.
Okay, that's a great point, actually. Thank you.
Continuing on from the previous list, I actually did forget one. I brought up a list now just so I can fully cover it. And once I do fully cover them, I would want to go back and I can kind of go back and forth and talk a little bit about the enchantments we use on the field
That would be
and
amazing.
yeah, how we actually use them and common pitfalls we see. I just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of all the different enchantments available. So at fourth level, I did miss Imbue Shield, which is just basically making that shield invulnerable to all but one spell that I'm aware of. The only spell that's going to affect Imbue Shield is going to be that pernicious Void Sphere that wizards get at level 6. That's a
Spear of Annihilation.
Sphere of Annihilation, just causing all those problems. But anything else is going to be completely ineffective against Imbue Shield. Also, you get a lot of bang for your buck because Imbue Shield gets you 2 per purchase.
Yep. Sorry, gang. I'm
Uh,
getting in now.
for
I'll be
those
upstairs in a second. We can.
for those that don't know, this is Sid, our usually my other half in the and here at the table. He's been running around like a chicken with his head cut off today, so but he is finally able to start joining us. So everybody, obviously he's here. But Bremlin, let's go ahead and get back to letting you cover everything. And like I said, like you said, I would love to hear your guys' back and forth on the different enchantments and some strategies you guys might have to share with us.
all right, so we've hit 6th level. This is the big ones. Um, Ancestral Armor is an enchantment that I generally don't take because the people who need Ancestral Armor, warriors, they get Ancestral Armor. So they're the guys who have the big armor, so it makes sense that they can do that, and theirs is EX, so I don't generally take it. But Ancestral Armor, for those who are unaware, it just makes it so that those wearing armor can treat any sort of hit from magic or extra projectiles as a singular hit instead of whatever effect would normally affect the armor, which can be very useful. So, a magic ball hitting it that would normally have a much greater impact would just hit it and take 1 point off of the armor in question in the location in question.
Want to throw in too as to why I personally am not a big fan of this, and then Abea, if we can get your opinion as well. Um, this is a sixth level enchantment, and Druid has an equivalent much faster. It doesn't give your sixth level, a six armor warrior ancestral with the Druid. It's up to 2 points, but that's 2 points of armor that is skin tight for him, whereas this is physical that you would have to have. And it's the exact same effect for both. Abea, what's your thoughts on ancestral?
Yeah, I'm more hesitant to pick up Ancestral mainly because a lot of our battle games don't really require that from me.
Mm-hmm.
And the kind of healer that I play, getting Ancestral Armor, it's like a little bit too costly for the kind of I guess I want to say work that I do. Like I'd much rather like pick up a stun or a persistent, like an extra one, than get an ancestral armor. Like you said, there's other people that can give that a lot faster than I can,
Mm-hmm.
and it's per refresh as well. So it's like I don't get as much um, oomph on the field as I would like.
For those newer players who are starting to learn the game and coming here to learn about it,
Yeah,
I do want to throw out a per refresh is something where you will essentially work really hard, really fast, and then gas yourself out really quickly. It's like running a sprint at the start of a marathon. Trying to dead sprint as fast as you can for the 6 miles. You're probably going to be pretty tired and done very quickly. And when it comes to perf refreshes, you have to time that sprint, quote unquote, um, to the most effect.
All right. Continuing on, we have at level 6 mass healing. You can only take it once. It gives you the ability to basically do a combat cast version of a heal with an incredibly quick chant, single chant up, I grant thee healing. So you can put this as one of the few enchantments you put on yourself as a healer. I generally consider this kind of a combat cast or a combat healing. You're going to be up close. You can even do it with gear in hand. You just put your hand on someone and say, I grant thee healing, and they get healed. Um, I used to love this, but if I'm running Warder, it's on my list because it's great, because I can just put a persistent on myself, and we'll talk about persistent in a moment and why that's really important. But I find it personally difficult because when I'm playing healer, I tend to pull back a bit more and run midline or backline. And just for some quick context, you got combat zones, so a frontline healer will be up in the grind with the other fighters, providing that direct frontline combat aid. Midline will be, as it sounds like, just a bit further back. So you might see your necromancers here in the midline, or someone who's like seeking to kind of run in and support those lacking areas or catch players before they move too far to summon them and resurrect them to keep them up close in front. And then, your backline priest healers are going to be the ones who are going to be pulling people out of nirvana and healing them that way and bringing them back into the fight, usually in your longer spawn time games. So mass healing, I would generally put as someone who wants to be up in the thick of it, because if someone hits you in the leg, you say, "I grant thee healing," even with your full equipment in your hands. You stand back up and you keep the fight going. Or you see someone pivotal get legged, you run up and "I grant thee healing," and they're back up fighting immediately. The big downside is it's on you, and if you get hit and it's not persistent, it falls off, and now you've lost a 6th level spell slot, which I don't know. I'm very precious about my spell slots, so I get paranoid about it. I think you usually kind of run more of a combat healing perspective, so I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, Abeha.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. You have to be very intentional about being a frontline healer, or just kind of playing closer to the line. And I tend to fall back a lot more mid to back when there isn't another healer on. And I love kind of touching base with healers and just being like, "Hey, what are you running? What do you focus on? What are you good at? Or I guess what do you want to do?" And then I'll try and puzzle piece what they might be lacking and what I can kind of fill in for. Um, I especially love mass healing, especially in, I guess, games that require like holding objective or like sieges, like breaking a wall. Kind of making sure that our big guns are keeping the line, or are in the thick of it, and not getting pulled into, I guess, I forget what the right word is, but like them controlling our timing and our respawn. Like the last thing I want to do is like get our big hitters like back at Nirvana, and they push into our, I guess, objective, or into our side.
Hmm.
I see it a lot more like controlling tempo, um, and yeah, just keeping the fight going, especially if we've got a good push, or if we're close to, I guess, capturing the point.
So you mentioned controlling tempo, and I want to ask a question for both of you if you're willing to answer. Um,
Mhm.
and because we're mainly talking about Warder because of the enchantments, um, how would you say the standard quote unquote um, build and play of the Warder healer class would play? Is it controlling the tempo? Is it the back line? Is it the midline? Is it um, are they just brawling up front, or are they the ones that are trying to be the most strategic? Well, let's start with Abeja, because Bremlin's gotten most of the speak tonight.
Um, yeah, I actually really love that question. I think Order is kind of a switchblade for the healer like archetypes. And like Switchblade, I mean Swiss Army knife, like you do a little bit of everything. And so you will see warders like uh typically towing the line between mid to front, mid to back, depending on where they're most needed. Um, and you had talked about the tempo. I think Warder especially kind of pads the team uh, to kind of account for like we know that the monk is always going to have like an adaptive blessing. You know, you want to make sure that the people that you're sending to deal with the monk or the harasser or the flanker that they're well equipped to come out of that scenario um, at least alive, or if not, like leave a big enough impact that somebody else in the team is recognizing that there's a threat right there. Um, yeah, I feel like you had another part of the question. Did I answer the
No,
whole
you pretty
question?
much got it. But I do want to hear Bremlin's thoughts as well.
So I'll talk about a bit about the difficulties of Warder when we talk about it, but I personally, if I am playing Warder, I find myself being actually much more frontline because I feel confident. I'll take my mass healing and I'll throw a persistent on it, and I'll run up there. And that's because I feel like for me, it's harder to have a continual impact without being up front as a Warder because I don't get ice balls because Warder, the archetype, removes your ability to have death spells, so that means you're not going to be able to have your undead minions. It removes command spells, which is a lot of the CC I would try and pull from my midline position, and it removes subdual, so I'm not able to take my ice balls.
Hmm.
But I totally can take a flail, and I can be a real problem that way. It also kind of conflicts with priest because when I'm running a priest build, you can only use your meta magics like say persistent, or the meta magics that you would use like swift can only be used on spirit school spells, which none of the enchantments are. So if I am running warder, which I do love warder and I love the idea of warder, but it does have a few pitfalls.
Hmm.
um I find myself being very upfront and combative when I do it.
Okay. We definitely need to get more into the water build a conversation. It sounds like, but we do, I think, have only two enchantments left.
Yeah, two major enchantments.
Okay, so let's go ahead and go over them, and then we'll get more into the meat and potatoes because it's starting to get interesting to me.
So the last two big enchantments are Phoenix Tears, which is, that high level warrior ability. It is an enchantment that when you die, you don't die. Instead, you go frozen, and then you come back in 30 seconds. And I've never, again, it's one of those things I've never used it because it feels like it's made for the warrior's kit, and it's difficult to see a lot of use cases for me personally, at least, on the field in Florida, because the people who are going to be wearing heavy armor are the warriors, and they already have it, and they get all their armor back, and they come back to life after 30 seconds, and it's great. But I could be putting other enchantments that I think are generally more useful, and that's just my opinion. Beha, do you make much use of Phoenix Tears?
No, honestly, I think a lot of our fighting culture right now, there is a big um, influx of warriors, or at least I'm seeing a lot more warriors on the field. And so, like, I like to tailor my spells to what is needed. And so I don't really see um, much usage from me, like giving Phoenix Tears to others. But I think it's a great enchantment, and I think um, it can be especially helpful for I guess. Like, I mean, even then, I don't really see a lot of peasant players. But I would be interested to start seeing it more or use it more on the field. There's just not much of a demand.
All right, and then that brings us up to the last actual enchantment on the field, which is going to be protection from magic. This is the big boy enchantment. Enlightened Soul prevented all verbal magics. This one's just going to prevent all magics with a tiny little asterisk on there because there's still a few that can affect your people that you're throwing this onto. Their weapons can still be heated because it's targeting the gear. They can still get hit by that Sphere of Annihilation, and they can still get struck by phase bolts. So you just got to be careful about those very specific ones, but otherwise, they ignore dang well everything.
I mean, Pro Mag is chef's kiss.
Yeah.
Stops everything. Uh, Beha, do you have any thoughts on the Pro Mag?
Yeah. So I'm very careful about the pro mags that I give, because on the upside, like it protects you from everything, but it also protects you from me, and I can't do my job when you have pro mag, because it kind of conflicts in resurrecting and healing. So it's essentially like if you really want it, I'll give it to you, but know that like you're essentially on your own. You're going to have to wait until the respawn. And if they're comfortable doing that, like being out of the game for 30, 60 seconds, because correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe even release doesn't work on them. So if they get frozen, there's very little that I can do to get them back in the game quicker.
So
Would
it
have to be
release it.
it'd have to be an EX. Would have to be an EX style release, but even then, I don't see many situations where they would get CC'd.
Correct.
But
So
Mm,
just to throw this out there, when it comes to Pro Mag, it is protection from magic. And as Cid just mentioned, we have those EX abilities out there, which are most notably found on things like the Monk and the Scout,
mhm,
who both have an answer for this. If it is to heal, they both have a heal that is EX, which stands for extraordinary. If it's a healer or the druid, they actually have to cast and use magic. So
the other
protection for mag would not stop the heal from the monk or the scout, but it will stop the druid or the healer throwing it out there. So you
mhm,
do
mind
need to
mag
understand the source.
protection from magic also has the caveat that it curses the target.
Yeah,
mhm,
and that is something Briggs bringing up is that curse effect because it does mean that summoning from Nirvana is, a non-starter, and on the field you're only gonna be able to raise dead then, which is a pretty new feature. So always good to have one of those in the kit. If
mhm,
I am gonna make use of Promag, I'm gonna throw it on anyone with because our normal raises don't give back armor, so they're gonna want their armor back if they're taking the time and the heat exhaustion to wear the dang stuff in Florida. So that's kind of what I do is I just throw it on people who they're gonna want the full spawn anyways.
Are you talking about for Promag? I mean, yeah,
Yes.
mhm,
I can
yeah.
definitely
The
say,
only
I can definitely say when I play warrior, I prefer pro mag over anything else. I'll take care of myself because if it's warrior, I'm going to be in my armor. I can keep
mhm,
myself alive. I can heal myself because I'm just not going to lose my limb. Like I'll make
mhm,
sure it stays. Um,
mhm,
you'll destroy my armor, but my leg will still be there, and I can fight my way back. And a lot of other people I know of who have the capability to do so will also try to take a pro mag instead of having the reliance on the magic. They'll protect themselves with that uh, protective shield that's now around them. So we've gone through the enchantments and the basics here. So I'm gonna leave it up to a Bremlin. Where do you want to take this next? But
Well,
you
I would like to just real quick talk about persistent, which is the is a meta magic. and it is a healer, the healer special. It's what kind of, I think, gives any amount of healer enchantments like the kind of value that can make that value proposition exist for healer versus druid as an enchanter goes. Because persistent is a meta magic that allows you to make any enchantment you put onto someone persistent through death. So even if they die, their enchantments don't fall off, they just stick with you. And that I think I've heard it compared before to a slow burn candle versus a bonfire. So, you know, a druid is a bonfire. They burn incredibly bright. Well, I guess actually it's not a great example. A firework. They burn incredibly bright and fast, but their enchantments are going to fall off when their enchantee dies. Versus a healer, unless it gets dispelled, it's just gonna stay.
I mean,
Beha?
so the big thing,
Oh, go ahead, Sid. Go ahead.
I want to ask both of you, at least when we're talking about the concept of persistent. First, I do want to hear your thoughts on it, Abeja, and then from there, I want you to answer. I guess hit the question first. What enchantments are your personal favorites to persist, and what goes into your thought process when putting that on for folks?
Yeah. Mm, my favorite ones off the cuff. Um, Probably gonna be pro protection from projectiles. Um, and yeah, my knee jerk reaction is just that. Um, Mainly because that's what's asked of me. A lot of fighters don't really ask for a persistent blessing against harm or um, like the smaller the smaller enchantments. They much rather prefer protection from the projectiles since they at least I've found that our archers are really good. And yeah, mainly my thought process is just the do I know if there's going to be archers on the other team? Can my team withstand their level of archery? How much of an impact will they have on the line or on me being in the front line? Uh, yeah.
Something I want to say about Neverwinter specifically and its archers, compared to some of the other kingdoms out there for anybody who might be listening. Neverwinter is one of the hotter, if not the hottest kingdom. And I don't mean that as in, ooh la la, that man is gorgeous. I mean, oh my god, it's like 110 degrees out here and the humidity is 95%. It is extremely hot, and it is therefore a lot of players down here aren't going to be wearing as much armor. When you take away armor, archers' effectiveness starts to increase. Whereas one hit from the archer can now be a kill or even just a maim. In the right kingdom, where it's colder and you have more armor, one hit is just a point. It's just a point unless you're hitting that far target who really should have been paying attention to you anyways. So just something to throw out there about protection from projectile and the effectiveness against your archers is you also need to take into account of where you're located.
The big That's a big thing to kind of keep in mind as well. Um, so before we move into the next part of the conversation, Bremlin, what is your opinion and what is like one enchant that you always seem to find yourself either using with persistent? What is like your go-to, or is there any sort of difference that you might have comparatively to Abeja's list or decision on that?
I just find that my go-to is Enlightened Soul because it gives you the better majority of what you're going to get from a pro mag without the rather significant cursed downside.
Yeah,
So I mean, there's always going to be casters on the field and some of the usually outside of ice ball being singularly devastating on the field, all of the devastating CC is going to be someone shouting a spell at you. So ignoring and going up and smacking them instead with your boffer, so it's a win.
No, I mean, I can definitely agree to that, given both situations and circumstances we have to deal with in this kingdom, whether it be getting like perforated with arrows or just getting lit up by verbals. Both are most certainly big issues that we kind of have to see, or we see a lot with our fighters. Um, Before we go any further, I wanted to take a few questions. Um, Given the fact that we don't have one of our guests here tonight, we probably will be focusing more on the healer questions. So for the bard questions that were left down, I will answer them personally, and then when we do inevitably do the bard, we'll answer those questions personally. Um, so for healer question, and then we'll ask if both of you will get the chance to answer. We can have some crossfire on it and just generally give kind of our own opinions on it. How do you find a good balance between active abilities, res spell balls, etc., and enchantments on your list? We'll start with Abeja and then go to a Bremlin on that.
Yeah. I will say, depending on which list I'm using, I feel like my current, I guess, inclination is to always use my spell lists that take advantage of my more active spells. I find myself relying more on my active spells rather than my passive abilities or passive enchantments that I hand out to people. Mainly, I think the main reason behind that is depending on my team composition. So the people that are around me. A lot of the times I end up fighting with a bunch of people that I don't normally fight with, or I'm not familiar with their tactic or what their, I guess, specialty is. And so, in those instances, when I'm playing with people from, a different part of Neverwinter that I only ever see at Kingdom, and I don't have as much practice working with them in a unit, I tend to rely a lot more on res bodying things that I can actively do to affect the tempo and the way that we play the game.
So from my end, I suppose if I am playing a proper warder, meaning that I'm playing on a big field like a kingdom event, and I actually have to take the warder archetype, um, the warder archetype really does shoehorn you into a very specific role of focusing on those enchantments because it does remove your ability to get death, command, or subdual. So no subdual means you can't get entangle or ice ball or abeyance. No command, again, you're not going to have your hold person. You can still shove people, obviously. So I find that if I am running it, my CC is very limited, so I do find myself fighting a lot closer, but I'm going to focus on, you know, sort of that semi frontline setup where I'm going to have my enchantments. And I suppose if you are running warder, you need less, and that kind of ties into a little bit is that if you are playing on a field, people are at Kingdom, but they're not always looking to a warder. They're going to be going to druids a lot first. So you need
Mm-hmm.
less enchantments than you would sometimes think. So you don't want to overload yourself with enchantments, especially because warder doubles the amount you take. So I'm only gonna, do maybe a purchase of Pro Mag and maybe two of Enlightened Soul and one of Pro, and then the rest of my list will be equipment and things like experience to dispel magic and things like that to help me have sort of a battlefield impact of still doing CC and fighting.
Makes sense. It's a good way to look at it. Second question. We'll start with you, a Gremlin, on this one. For healers, what is the ideal battle game for your kinds of lists, whether that be Necro, Warder, or Priest?
Oh, I mean, right now I'm kind of on a big necro kick because it's just real strong.
Oh yeah.
Um, you can run a necromancer list with raised dead, and you can charge it with steel life. And I don't even I I think I'm running one resurrect and one summon corpse on my list right now, so I barely feel like I'm a healer. I
Is it just the
mostly
Goon
just
Squad?
Yeah, I'm just mostly goon squatting with a bunch of people at the field more often than not.
That is
Hmm.
the brick of like 4 or 5 undead minions. What you thinking about? What are your thought on this?
Yeah, before I had gotten Paragon, I was pretty much only focused on like Necro Priest. Um, because it was just like so, I guess, nice to have that kind of big impact that I felt like other versions of the game lacked for Necromancer. I do think that we definitely overcorrected for for Necromancer, but as of right now, I find myself using a more like battle healer kind of list. So I definitely play a bit more greedy. Um, a lot of frontline. I like throwing myself and into the fray. You know, using my ice balls. Mass healing, um, and stuns.
The packing the silver bullets to use them when you
Yeah.
need them. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's all a very good way to look at it. And I appreciate both of you guys for very genuinely very different like methodologies to playing the same class for it. So that's gonna be questions for right now. Something I wanted to talk about because all three of us here are Paragon healers, and Lyle's been running around seeing us do this shit long enough that he knows exactly how this works for the most part. I want to talk shop on a few things, mostly talking about how Undead Minion operates now, kind of strengths that it has, the kind of not necessarily limitations, but things that we need to make sure that our players, our teammates, understand when dealing with us, when we have Undead Minion, when we are running Necro, when we are running Necro Priest, the kind of weird eccentricities for it, and how we can kind of suggest and give our own opinions about it in a way that is conducive for constructive criticism. By that I mean, we know right now that whatever is going to be voted on in 2 weeks is going to determine what we're going to have for the next year and a half. So the big thing I want to ask you guys is, what are your thoughts on how that big change, because it was arguably the biggest change that Healer got outside of our Dispel buff, which was, in my opinion, and I'll kind of tip my hat on that, it was a humongous course correction and probably should not have been given, but I digress. Your opinions
Mm-hmm.
on how that spell operates, how you guys tend to use it, how you guys tend to explain those kinds of weird, eccentric enchantments, and it doesn't necessarily have to apply just to Gummy. It can apply to like things like Phoenix Tears, Pro Mag, um, Troll's Blood, if you ever have to give that in any other sort of situation or circumstance, even though you wouldn't have it in this class, but just general idea of how you kind of communicate that with your teammates. How do you both of you go about that?
Well, and I kind of want to talk about this a little bit, if you don't mind me jumping in here.
All right.
Um, I think one of the biggest issues running any kind of enchantment build outside of Undead Minion, because people do seem to just pick up on what this one's smelling of pretty quickly, is getting people to remember that they dang well have enchantments.
Yeah.
Whenever I give out an enchantment, because I've had multiple players who I give them an enchantment, and then they'll take either a spell or even a death that I'm like, man, that no, you didn't you didn't need to take that CC, you didn't need to take that death. But once you take it, it's done. It is what it is. And I've tried a few methods now, but that is like one of the biggest pitfalls I find trying to run enchantments or a warder specifically, even on especially on big fields with people you're not familiar with. So something I've tried doing with some success is when I give someone an enchantment, I ask them to verbally look at me and tell me, "Hey, what did I just give you? What does it do?" And if I raise them up and they haven't had it stripped off of them through some means, I'll ask them every time I see them, "Hey, what enchantment did I give you? What does it do?" Just to have it in their brain, because otherwise I feel like I could have run a number of other lists that would have had more impact if people aren't making use of the enchantments.
I got you. Given making sure people understand what's going on before you hand them the keys to the Ferrari, so to speak. What about you, Ove? How do you go about speaking to the childrens before you go and just send them out there to go commit war crimes?
Yeah, I mean, I relate so much to what Sir Lyle was just saying. Like, there's nothing more frustrating for me as a caster when someone will nod their head and be like, "Yeah, of course I know what this means," and then like there's just a blankness, and I see them on the field like going back to Nirvana, and I'll have to like essentially call their attention and yell at them in the middle of a fight and be like, "You respond on me, like you have to come back to me." Um, I try and simplify it as best as I can, especially for newer fighters. So I'll like give them the bullet points. I'm like, "You're my minion. You come back to me. Uh, you do not go back to base. Wherever I am, you find me. I will not come and find you. That is how this works. You go and die. If you sit there and say you're dead, that's not going to do anything for me. You respawn on me. Particularly for undead minion, I should specify. Um,
Real quickly,
yeah.
Abeja, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want it to be known that that was a Bremlin, not Lyle. That
Oh,
was.
sorry. Sorry.
He wishes he
Sorry.
was this good looking, but
Mm.
just want to make sure we're giving credit where credit is due.
And that
I'm
guy's
so
got the best
sorry.
fashion ever,
No,
Winter.
that's fine.
God, give that man the respect he's due.
Real.
Let's be real. Nobody wants to be compared to me, and it's not worth it for him. It's not nice.
Jesus.
So I guess we're talking about new minion versus old minion a little bit too.
It's more like just how do both of you feel about it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a course correction. I mean, I think the fact that there's something that both Undead Minion and kind of coming with it is Raised Dead part and parcel because it is part of Undead Minion, but also a spell you can take separately. It is in a very strong position, and like I think you said, a bit of an overcorrection. I can understand what they were going for with it, but the fact that it's going to ignore curse, that was um, it ignores curse and also just being able to bring people back that quickly and in the way that you do, and being able to no longer have to as much deal with that suppressed condition. It just makes minions in a very strong position right now. I mean, assassins have never been happier, considering that curse condition and the way it interacts now means that you can't even pull them out of can't even banish them now.
It's so long as it's not an EX one, yeah. It is. Those guys are clicking their heels right now with fucking glee, as they enjoy pretty much getting away with murder. And to you, Abeja, what do you think? What is your thoughts on how Undead Minion is kind of shaped out between what has come or what come before and how we're at right now?
Yeah, I definitely think it's an overcorrection. It's unnecessary, especially because they took away what was it, the waiting period to be able to use the abilities, or they shortened it, I believe. And so
Originally, it was like indefinitely.
yeah, and so you get your full abilities within 30 seconds of getting into the game. You don't have that cursed state anymore, and it can be very overwhelming for a team who's not prepared to handle that, because it does change the flow of the game. It does change the tempo. I find it's significantly easier for me when I have gummies, because that's less people that I have to be worrying about, or going through the resurrection in Kent, which tends to be long. But I've been hoping since this change that we'd be seeing more dispels being taken, but unfortunately I haven't really seen that shift. And I'm unsure why, because it's not like it's infallible. Like it's not like it's like it can't be countered. We just haven't really seen people make that mental shift into guarding against gummies, or actively dealing with them. They'd much rather prefer like killing them and then just, I guess, pushing forward.
I mean, it's weird to see that you'll just see like complete parts of the game just kind of sit there. It's like, nope, I'm not going to deal with the. I'm not going to use dispel. And you're
Hmm.
just kind of giving them the look, thinking like, what is wrong with you people? Like, this is your silver bullet. This is how you deal with this problem. So no, it's a very astute observation to make on that, because as any kind of like class that deals in enchantments a decent bit, you're sitting there hoping and praying to God that your guys are coming back and they're not saying, "Sorry, boss, I got dispelled." And both of you have made quite a reputation for yourselves, pretty much being that end all be all, sitting in the middle of a brick of guys, as everyone just shows up. It's like, "Yep, I'm good. Keep going. Bring me back." And it is an interesting conversation to see happen, and like an interesting shift in meta that hasn't happened yet, which hopefully happens soon. Let's see. Next question. Oh, okay. So we're good on those. So we'll be moving in, I guess, into the second half of this. I guess for the better part of speaking on is like, if what I want now to at least talk about with our enchant conversation is more to kind of shift more towards the understandings of how we use these kinds of things in a way that is both efficient for taking space and how you guys tend to parse them out. So, do you guys tend to wait it out a little bit? Do you guys tend to give small enchants out to bait out dispels? How do you guys tend to play around your enchantment economy?
I'll be honest, I'm perhaps a poor merchant in that sense because I'm just gonna give all my enchantments at the start and then kind of just go with it. Um, Again, I don't know. I personally find that the biggest issue at Kingdom events and less locally, but definitely Kingdom events, is getting all of them out there in the first place. I end up with some in reserve just because I have difficulty giving everyone enchantments, which I know sounds like it shouldn't be a thing, but somehow it is.
Happen. You know,
Yeah, I've definitely had games where um I do give out all of my enchantments in the beginning. For teams that I feel have a stronger martial presence, or I know especially do certain techniques very well, like flanking or breaking up the line, that tend to send like distractors, harassers. I'll tend to, or if they have an especially good caster that I know uses dispel, I'll um, I'll bait them with smaller enchants and then save. I'll save my bigger ones for the, I guess, the middle part of the game. Um, I like to see if they'll bite or if they use their dispels on the get go. So because if I see that from the initial, I guess, fight, the initial like, fighting for objective, fighting for something, that I don't hear dispels, that's when I'm like, okay, we can put in. I can throw out everything.
okay. That's a perfectly good understanding. And then by no means does this mean that one is any better than the other. It's more just to understand like how some people will just throw enchants out with that intention of just saying, use them if you got them. They're not going to blow dispels on everything. Not all of those people are going to get, or they're going to catch one. And if games are quick enough, especially with round-based games, throwing out all those enchantments isn't necessarily a bad idea. So do not take anything to say or to hear. You've heard here, listeners, that a Gremlin's method is not any less valid. It is actually quite strong.
Mm-hmm.
It's just
Uh,
more that it floods the field early.
and we are talking about strategies ultimately here, folks. And one of the things that you should always take away is that the right strategy is the one that works. Um, we have, you, as you've been in these meetings with us and listened, you've heard a lot of varying different ways that we've taught everybody approaches the problem. Um, that's the way we do, and the way Sid does, the way a Beha or a Bremelin or myself. It may not be the right one. If you're winning and you're losing, there's something to be learned and take away from. Walk away from every win and loss with a lesson learned. And if you do, I promise you'll start to win more. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure we got that in there as we're talking about these strategies of shoot everything out right off the bat or take your time and pick the right moments.
So another question to talk about, at least with strategy, is not just the methodology with when you give out these kinds of enchantments, but the way that you guys tend to kind of move with your squad. When you guys are moving in to take an objective site, so whether that be like oh, what the, that feedback. Is it me? Oh, no. So when you're going, let's say that like in most of these situations, like it's a control point game or node capture, whatever game mode you like to call it. How do you guys tend to like move within that squad? Let's say you're running Gummy or you're running a decently healthy unit. Do you guys tend to play a little bit closer to the front? Do you guys tend to play a little bit like closer mid back? Like, or and how do you guys shift and know when to shift between one to the other? I bet I want to you on that first.
Yeah. Um, I especially like unit fighting in the sense that it doesn't matter who I have next to me is a gum or not. It's more knowing that the people next to me are able to kind of connect with commands or connect with, I guess, my objective for unit fighting. Um, Usually, I'm going sword and board. I find myself typically fighting in the front, especially if I'm unit fighting, because it feels a lot more secure. Um, but I think it also depends on whether or not there is another healer available on the team. Because if I am the sole person for respawns or healing, then I'll tend to play in the back and protect, protect the spawn or protect whatever. Try and get people back onto the field as fast as possible. But unit fighting, I definitely more likely in the front.
Okay. And do you, Gremlin?
So I suppose I I give out my enchantments at the start, and then kind of going with what I said, where I'm gonna give all those enchantments. I'm playing a different game then. I'm gonna give everyone the enchantments, and then I'm just gonna focus on my second half of my own personal gameplay, which is gonna be the CC, the fighting, and like throwing out those dispels. So, kind of for me, if I happen to see someone and their enchantments fallen off later on, and I happen to have some, I'll give it back out. But I suppose I'm not a very tactical fighter. I'm gonna give everyone the goodies. I'm gonna give them all the candy out at the start, and then I'm just gonna fight my fight for that game.
That's fine. Personal
Mhm.
objectives are just as important as team objectives in many situations. The difference is whether or not like personal. So the difference between personal objectives and like team objectives, for a listener, is that a personal objective is just what your internal class is built to do, and what you're like, and making sure that your job is being done. So if my job is to make sure that the opposing team isn't able to move and they're not able to contest my guys, which in many situations is what a Bremlin tends to do, he is assisting his team. He is helping his team. He's just doing so by actively making sure that the opposing team can't contest, which that is personal objective that assists in a team's victory. Very important to keep in mind, and it's one of those things that you want to also learn to do, because just being, all about tactics and learning on how to work with teammates and other things will not do you a lick if you are not able to understand what your own personal objectives are. That is very important to understand. But both of you understand it in very different ways. So the way that Abeja mentions it, it's very much understanding where does my team need me at any given moment, and where can I go and shift in order to go and be the accommodator, the frontliner that my team needs at the time. Whereas a Gremlin is constantly looking for holes and problematic people to deal with for his own personal methodology, which is going to help his team regardless. So notice two distinctive styles, yes, but they are inherently reaching the same conclusion. So, as you can tell, that means that there are, like, when you're looking at it and you're deciding on how I want to play healer, well, and even in just in like the internal understandings between warder, necro, enchantments, midline caster, frontliner. They all can get to the same result. You just need to tether your understandings and what you want to play and what feels fun for you to play, feels comfortable for you to play, and make it work for you. Because you can tell these two are incredible healers, and hearing both of their differences, the very different methodologies that they take to get there, is telling that kind of theory. I know I was being a little redundant with that statement, but I figured the thought kind of predicated it. Thankfully, I think we've got through most of the stuff we needed for healer today. So let's hit this with, huh?
I was gonna say we've been at this for about an hour, and we did decide because of some of the last minute issues, we had to drop to just Bard. So why don't we go ahead and let our guests give their closing thoughts on Healer?
Oh, absolutely. So I'll give your closing thoughts, and I do want to ask one question for you guys, or I have a favor to ask. To the people who want to learn to play healer, and to those of you guys that you both trained, because both of you have trained and assisted the next generation of healer, what advice do you guys have for them?
Hmm.
Hmm.
I definitely think, and Abremlin touched on this earlier, play, and you did too, Sid, play the kind of healer that is fun for you. And so I say that to mean because I feel like with particularly healer, there's the expectation that you will be a resbot, whether that's self-inflicted expectation or like expectation from your team. You have just as much say on how you can affect your team. Your team may want a resbot, but they don't need a resbot. So it's important to not get typecasted, uh, or, I guess, led to one conclusion. As you can see, like, Abremlin and I play um, similar styles, but it's still very different. And the way that we engage in the game, or find, fun in this class can be very different. So I encourage you to be creative, and I encourage you to, you know, make your healer like your own. Because it doesn't have to look like mine. It doesn't have to look like a Brenlin's or Sid's or anybody else's. Because it's the way that you're playing with the game. So if you want to be a battle healer, go be a battle healer. If you want to be a warder, go be a warder. And if you want to be a resbot, go be a resbot. Just don't let people kind of guide you to that conclusion. Um, yeah.
Well said.
Uh, for me, if I had to give any advice, because I have seen it happen now, um, play other classes sometimes too.
Hmm.
Um, if you only play healer, you're going to have these sort of these I don't know what the right word is, gaps in your kit. Because healer a large part of healer
Hold on.
is that sort of react. Huh?
Mhm. Well,
Sorry,
can you hear me?
my mute was a little slow to go off.
Okay.
Sorry.
Um, So healer is in part a reactive class. It is you have to react to the field. And part of that reaction is understanding other classes' kits. And you can look over and read over and study what other classes get, but really you're going to understand better if you have had a little bit of experience, especially with other casters, other casting classes, so you can understand what they're going to bring and what you can expect, and then how you can work, as a healer to enhance those on your side and counter those on the enemy side.
I mean, well said. And I think both of you guys have brought up very good conversation of this, and I'm very proud to have both of you guys on. Um, so, with that said, that's going to call it for us for this evening. One of the things that I will be going into, at least will be our next episode, we're going to be going into a series talking more on the martial side of the game, because we've been doing caster strategy for quite a bit now. We're going to be going over tanking, which is just the general idea of holding ground and taking ground. And we're going to be moving off into the areas of line fighting and flanking over the next 3 episodes. So stay tuned for those. Those are going to be real fun. We're going to have a few individuals. I believe, if I remember correctly, Sir Balisk has already agreed to want to come on.
Yeah, we just haven't set up a time yet. But yes, Sir Ballas said he'd happily come in and have a conversation with us.
Excellent. I also spoke to Sir Pork Chop. He also says he would probably want to hop on for that. So expect some real fun times, because those two are probably some of the most dynamic sword knights in the game. And both are extremely fun to watch on the field. So be ready for that when those come out. We implore any of you, if you guys have any questions, any concerns, any sort of things that you want to talk about, my DMs are normally open here on the Neverwinter Discord. You can also find me on Facebook. You can find me on YouTube. And I will take just about any question and teach anything you guys may need or might have. And I know Lyle's also got relatively open DMs as well, similarly open DMs. So,
Always.
yep. I'd like to thank At Arms Abeja
Yeah.
and At Arms of Bremlin for being out here. Thank you guys so much for coming on. You guys are wonderful. I'm sorry that the profile was a little bit narrow in what we wanted to talk about. When we actually get to talking about healer proper as a class and going over it, likely I probably might have you guys back on again, just because I kind of want to have a real full conversation about all the classes at some point in time. But that's an episode for another day. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I have been Battlemaster Cid.
And I am, please don't call me Sir Lyle.
No. Oh, no.
And
All
this
right,
has
ladies
been
and
an
gentlemen,
episode of the War Table. Make sure to stay hydrated.
stay hungry, friends.